Everybody, welcome to the Semantic Kernel Community Office Hours. This is a public forum, so just know that everything here is said publicly, but that allows you to speak up, to raise your hand, to share any very feedback or things that you want to give the Semantic Kernel team. And as we all know, we are very near to a 1.0 release, but in the meantime, leading up to that, we are, we have some release candidates. We have stuff that's very much fast moving in the pipeline. And this session is actually like all about that. I know we have a hackathon going on right now, actually. So if you haven't already signed up, please do. I'll put a link in the chat shortly. But yeah, this is the opportunity to, if you have the time, right, to try out the latest version of Semantic Kernel, to give the product team all this feedback, tell us what works, what doesn't, and yeah, we will make sure to incorporate all that into the actual 1.0 release. In terms of other announcements, if you missed last week, we had several members of the team kind of show off different aspects, whether that be updates to semantic memory, the new handlebars planner, and even OpenAI assistance with SK. So yeah, definitely check all that out. And yes, for the bulk of this time, I'm going to actually hand off to Matthew and the team to lead us in, if he wants to show off anything about V1, RC1, and to kick off the conversation.
Cool,
So
Matthew.
Thank you.
This week we released RC1, which is, there's a lot of breaking changes, and I just want to empathize with everyone in the audience right now. Folks trying to figure out like how it works, and because we've prioritized speed over perhaps documentation, a lot of it hasn't been documented. But the best resource that we do have today is the blog post that Alex just referenced, and I'll go ahead and pull that up. And as part of the blog post, we also went ahead and updated a few of our, let's see, is my screen sharing? Oh, I think I shared the wrong screen. I'll fix that. Some of our starter projects have been updated to release candidate. I think we're now at 2 at this point. So as part of release candidate 1, and as this is kind of calling out, we're now at 2. There's been quite a few changes. Probably the one that we are most proud of is we have just continued to refine and make the experience of using these AI models much easier. If you haven't already used function calling, it's kind of, in my opinion, what the future is going to look like. You get much more predictable results, and it's much more accurate and faster and all that good stuff. But it's always been really, really hard to do. So you had to describe your functions, actually call the model, review the results, form the operation, kind of send those results back to the chat history, and you kind of loop this over and over and over again. And with our release candidate, this is so much easier. You create your plugin, you create your kernel, and then we've added this new ability to kind of define what the function calling behavior is. I think there's like 3 or 4 different options, but the one I think most folks will start using is the auto invoke kernel functions. And what that will do is behind the scenes, it will actually just loop over and over and over again until the model has called all the functions it needs and is willing to send a message back to the user. And this basically models nearly one-to-one what OpenAI is doing with their assistance API behind the scenes, right? So if you're familiar with their run concept, they're doing the exact same thing. And we want to provide that same level of ease for folks that don't necessarily want to use assistance. Okay. And if you're curious of what this looks like in action, both of the starters that we're sharing for the hackathon. We have both a Hello World and a console app. Both of these use this new auto invoking capability for you to start building some pretty cool applications. So in the Hello World one, yep, here we go. You can see we have that line here. We're able to just stream back the results. And then in the console chat app one, same sort of deal, right? We can go into the program and see that setting being used. Where is that setting being used? Oh, this is dependency injection. It is here. Okay, so we can see that setting right here. So if you are participating in the hackathon, I'm just going to turn on the lights. If you are participating in the hackathon this week, I'd highly recommend starting with these starters. It should help. And just to kind of show you what it's like to actually use the starters. So this is the Hello World one. I've kind of, actually, this is for later. This is the console chat one. It really highlights the improvements that we've made to the kernel from a dependency injection perspective of all the feedback that I've heard previously on Semantic Kernel. The biggest challenge folks had was it didn't play nicely with DI. And so now, with the changes that we've made, you will be able to add a new kernel to your DI. You can build it with all of the different services that you need and the plugins that you need. And if you do need that kernel, right, you can simply say, hey, I want this kernel, you get it back, and then you can actually start using it. So in this case, what we're doing is we have this while loop where we're just getting user messages. And because we at the top level loaded it in with this light plugin, when I start having a conversation with this agent, it has the ability to get the current state of the lights and turn them on and off. So let's go ahead and restart this and just give this chat a whirl and see what it looks like. I guess what I'm amazed with is previously this used to take at least twice as many lines of code to get working. And if you look at some of the other SDKs out there, like LangChain, they still require twice as many lines of code to get something super basic like this working. So we can say something like, can you tell me if the light is on? Behind the scenes, we can actually go to the debug console and see that it called the getState method, which told it that the light is currently off. And we can ask it, can you toggle the light for me? Okay. And then again, if we go back to the debug console, behind the scenes, it's automatically using all of the functions, all the plugins that we put inside of the kernel in order to perform the right operation, which in this case should be to change the state. Let's see. The demo gods, are they with me today? Something frozen? Let's give this. Can you toggle the lights? And here, what's actually kind of cool with this example is it actually wanted to call a few things one after the other for it to answer. And so because I said toggle the lights, I wanted to just turn on, but this is actually kind of cool. It thought it meant turn it on and off. And so it actually called all the necessary functions automatically in order to turn the lights on and off and then respond back to the user. Without me having to create a loop or do any of that, I'm just using this auto invoke setting. Okay. And I see there's quite a few comments. I'm just going to take a look at that right now. So there's a few questions around token limits. So one of the challenges with function calling is every time you need a new function to call, you are sending the entire chat history to the model. OpenAI is trying to make this better with parallel function calling, so their latest models can actually send multiple functions back, which will reduce the number of round trips, reduce the number of tokens. But this is also a big reason why we believe planners are still going to be incredibly important, right? If you use something like our new handlebars planner, which creates basically a code that runs all of your plugins, that's a single prompt being sent to the LLM that comes back with a lot of very complex steps, right? So in that case, you're only being charged for that one prompt, and you get a lot of bang for your buck. But it all depends on the type of scenarios that you're trying to light up and how complex your scenarios are, right? So very, very complex scenarios, you might have to use something like function calling to iteratively kind of have it reason over what's happening. So it's a really case-by-case situation. Let's see what else is going on. Are you planning integration with TaskWeaver as allowing self-supervised agents to orchestrate multiple system calls? So yeah, the big hotness right now are all these like multi-agent programs and SDKs and what have you. We, on the Semantic Kernel side, are being heavily influenced by our peers in AutoGen. And so we are taking a lot of the great research that they're doing and baking it into our experimental assistance package. If that's something that you haven't checked out yet, I highly, highly recommend it. So if you are in Semantic Kernel, or actually, let's just go to the blog. So for Ignite, what we released over here, yeah. During Ignite, we actually released an experimental package for assistance. I would recommend checking that out. Our kind of expectation is for that supervisation aspect. What you should be able to do is basically create like a product manager assistant or agent, and that should be able to monitor the other assistants under the hood. So in this example, we've created 3 assistants: a designer, a developer, and a product manager. And the product manager is the one that's supervising and using the other assistants as plugins in order to get real work done. Okay. Great question. But definitely expect over the next early next year, our focus will be completely around multi-agent, and we'll be using the latest and greatest research from folks like AutoGen and TaskWeaver. Okay. I do see, yes, iKernel does no longer exist anymore. We've gotten a few questions on why that is. We really wanted to make sure that we had flexibility in the future, making sure that we weren't tied to an interface that if we wanted to change would require breaking changes. So as part of the RC1 release, you might see a lot of interfaces just magically disappear. They're likely still there. We just turned them into classes. And that just, again, that gives us flexibility. So in the future, if we want to add a feature, we aren't screwing you over with the breaking change. Okay. And I see Alessandro nodding and smiling with approval. And then there's some questions about intercepting regarding the function calling thing that I shared. A few weeks ago, we did release hooks or events as part of Semantic Kernel. Those are still there. You can use those in order to track what's happening behind the scenes, flag things, cancel operations, provide updates to users. So I'd recommend using those. We are going to leave it, however. This is something that I don't think we've shared publicly yet. We are going to leave our current events infrastructure as experimental. As our push towards V1, we did sync with all of the experts / geniuses in Azure and .NET land. And one of the bits of feedback that they gave us is our events architecture doesn't play completely nicely with dependency injection. And so we are going to leave our events and hooks in experimental, and in the new year, we will update it. That'll be one of the quick follows to make sure that it does play nicely with dependency injection. Okay. Yes, I should have had them change the lights in my room. Okay, I think. Okay. I'm just skimming. Okay. So that's kind of the I would say the sexy thing that we shipped as part of RC1 is the auto invocation. I do want to kind of go over some of the other big changes because they are large and they do help explain a lot of the other changes that you're having. I'm seeing in the comments right now some confusion of like, hey, where did my method go? Why is it named differently? One of the bigger reasons, and I keep going back and forth to it, is dependency injection was the biggest complaint. And so that actually had a lot of impact on how we name things, how we structure things. So that's one, right? We've kind of talked about that a few times already. We also wanted to drive alignment with how you call functions. So previously we had basically if you wanted to call a non-streaming method, one way of doing things. And then if you wanted to invoke a streaming method, there was a completely different way. The naming conventions were different, the types were different. With non-streaming, you had things like model result and result base, and then streaming, you had these content objects. So as part of RC1, to make it easier for folks to kind of learn the system, we aligned all of the naming conventions between these different pieces. Okay. So that's that. And then the last kind of bucket of updates, our friends in Azure AI, they are creating a marketplace and repositories for prompts. And the serialization format that they're using is this YAML format. There is plans on supporting JSON, and the current serialization that we support today with sk prompt.txt and config.json is not going anywhere. So if you have prompts there defined that way, that's okay. But if you do want to participate in Azure AI's prompt repositories and marketplace, you'll want to start leveraging these new YAML formats. And here we kind of show how you can load it in as a resource and actually run it, and how you can also change the template format to use other things like handlebars. And in the future, I've heard from the community wanting to use things like Liquid. So that is all possible now. There has been some confusions on how to actually use these new YAML formats. So one of the updates that we'll be providing later in the week is actual documentation and samples on that. In terms of like the big things that we've heard from folks from the community so far, most of it's just been around learning and guidance. So tomorrow we'll be publishing some migration docs to the new planners that were released during Ignite, since the old planners, Action, Sequential, and the V1 of Stepwise Planner is not making it into V1. So we'll provide that guidance. And then a lot of y'all have told us that, hey, we like the content on learn.microsoft.com, but it's functionally unusable right now because none of it's been updated. We'll be spending all day Friday updating those samples so that we can get those out to you as the community. Okay. And then the last other one, our new handlebars planner is currently broken in RC2. We already have a fix for it. And once we ship RC3 later tonight, it should be fixed. So if you haven't noticed, we're trying to be as responsive as possible to the community. And as long as there's feedback, and as long as we have fixes for the feedback, we'll keep pumping out these release candidate updates until we hit V.1. Okay. So I've been rambling for quite a while. I'm going to take a pause and see if anyone wants to come off mute for any questions. Otherwise, I'll start scanning the comments.
A lot of these samples I've seen so far in C# or .NET, I didn't see anything in Python. Is that just not the case?
Great question. So our focus so far has been on .NET and C#, and kind of the rationale for that is we have had to put all of our brain power. We even have a partner level IC engineer that's been like contributing and helping us get things right. We didn't want to spread ourselves too thin, right? And so once we get V1 locked for .NET, that will serve as a template for all of our other languages. Python, and Java. And the expectation is over January and maybe into mid-February, we will get both of those libraries up to the same standard, same interfaces, same patterns, as long as they're idiomatic as the .NET version. Okay. What's the function calling planner called? It's called function calling stepwise. What's the availability of Azure OpenAI prompt repositories? I don't know if it's been out yet, but internal first-party teams are already using it to publish prompts internally, and I think it's just a matter of time before it's actually in Azure AI Studio. Okay. Do we plan to create an SDK for TypeScript? We keep getting asked that. I was running into a personal project where I was like, you know, it'd be nice, an SDK for TypeScript. We don't have any concrete plans right now. There's been some hacks to see if we can actually automatically create the TypeScript SDK. So if we can find a creative way, or if we can find another team in Microsoft that can help sponsor it, we might do it, but we don't have anything concrete. Okay. And then Java. Java is interesting. So we, as a Semantic Kernel team, aren't actually funding it. There's another team in Microsoft that basically lives and breathes Java, and they're the ones sponsoring it. And there's even a engineer on loan from Salesforce that's helping with the Java library. So don't feel like we're being slowed down by getting this Java support. We have other teams in Microsoft that are helping us with that. David.
Yeah, hey. Love the RC. Glad to see the updates. And glad to be back. I haven't been back in a while. Life's been busy, but in a good way. My question, I think, is one that I've asked differently in the past, but it keeps coming up, is the support of like local models, or else not like as a service models. I get that GPT-4 is better at doing some of the planning that you guys have built your core product around, right? And expect that to remain the case for at least the near term. But in terms of predefining a schema so that you can get the right JSON call, or having models that are fine-tuned to make sure that you're passing the right arguments, the functionality is there with like local models, and that's something that's a big deal for me, right? Mostly because it then allows me to do more complex like monitoring than I can do in something like guardrails, right? Because I can actually like take the inputs, like map them in a latent space, and then measure nonconformity. Where if I'm just relying on business rules, or if I'm just relying on the controls that are built into some of these other orchestrators, I don't have that flexibility. So I'm aware that it's probably not like top of mind for y'all from a product perspective, but I would love to know if you guys are planning to add that support for different models from a planning and from like an argument passing perspective. So
it's very top of mind.
Oh, hey, all right, cool.
So obviously we've been working on this like V1 support, so we haven't had the most time to go, let's build some more connectors. But I guess from my side as a PM, before we lock all our V1 stuff, one of the concerns I have is, do we make our abstractions right so that we can support things like local models? So we do have members on the team right now trying to create some test connectors just to make sure that our abstractions work. So that's like step one. We likely won't release anything this calendar year because things are wrapping up. But early next year, we want to be able to provide support for local models, or at least for the most popular ones. What we've heard is a lot of people use OLLAMA, so we'll probably start there. And then the other piece is during Ignite, a ton of models were shared on stage. If you go to Azure AI Studio today, there's a ton of models that you can deploy on Azure that aren't OpenAI. Those are also at the top of our list of supporting inside of Semantic Kernel out of the box.
Awesome. I've got some stuff that I want to move away from like Lambda and DynamoDB and like make native to Semantic Kernel, but without necessarily having, GPT-4 dependency. So thank you from like a security perspective. Thank you. So,
David.
Yeah, just back to the Java real quick, since I'm one of the people that's working on the Java side of things. We do have the V1 samples compiling with some hacked together API. We're trying to put that all together in a way that it makes it easier for the community to follow and contribute if they want, and we'll probably make some announcement about the availability of that on Discord in the next few days.
Woohoo! That's exciting.
Hey, yeah. But yeah, it's just compile. It does not. There's a little bit that runs, but it's mostly just compile.
That's the first step. That's the first
exactly.
step.
Exactly.
Right. And I also want to say, like, this is a Microsoft crowd, so I'm sure most folks are using .NET and maybe Python. There are some like raving fans of the Java port, because Java right now is not getting a lot of love in the AI space, and y'all are it. Y'all are the shining beacon on the hill.
We'll get it done.
Get it done. Let's see. Konstantin, is there any news about the community toolkit? So I did look into it last time I was on the call, and you shared it. That particular what's it called, workspace domain org was just focused on UI components, so we weren't able to add things there. In the new year, we will revisit if we can get a community repo stood up for community created plugins or connectors or what have you. Okay. You have your hand, Konstantin. You want to come off mute?
Yeah. Hello again. So I think if someone from this amazing community work with enterprise clients, so for me, the biggest issue is I can't trust any library except like approved by Microsoft. Otherwise, I have to copy or so maybe it's again, maybe it's not like community toolkit, but maybe it's, as you mentioned on previous meetings, like just separate repo and say, okay, this is repo for any kind of memory, any kind of connectors, community do whatever you want, but we as a Microsoft kind of approves that license not going to be changed. So something I think if you be able to do this, it's totally enough, and I would like to commit into it.
Yeah, so the other strategy that we have going on that kind of sort of addresses that similar need, like, hey, I just need like a plethora of plugins for my AI to do useful and cool things, right? So we are working with teams across Microsoft so that they can publish their own functionality as plugins. And probably what I'm most excited about is Logic Apps and then the Power Platform connectors. We are working with both of those teams so that they will automatically publish all of their apps and connectors as plugins so that they can be used within Semantic Kernel.
Thanks.
Perfect. Okay. There's a lot of comments. If I miss any, does anyone, or if we weren't able to answer them in the chat, feel free to come off mute or to repost your question. Todd asked, is there any guidance on how to architect a semantic kernel solution? So we actually have our EMs, Mark and Ben, working on some architecture diagrams. And the current hope is to share those once we go V1 as part of a blog post. I guess the TLDR is, if you have an existing application and you already have some logic, like this is just an SDK with dependency injection, you just inject it as another service and you can use it and life is great. I do think as we look into the future and as we start creating things like agents, I think modeling all of these agents as microservices is going to be really beneficial for everyone. So using things like Kubernetes to have a very small application that serves up or uses semantic kernel to take in inputs and provide outputs so that you can scale these things up and down. I think that's the future, and that's kind of the architecture that Ben will be diagramming, and hopefully we can share next week. Ludovic. Sometimes what is explained in the document does not apply to me. These were full of questions and no answers. I just hope one day the community will come closer. So what I will say to that is, I would say pre V1, pre this RC1, this semantic kernel SDK, I'm not going to lie, it was hard. It's a lot of concepts, a lot of things going on. What that meant is our documentation was also complex, or at least I tried to make it less complex. What I'm really proud of the team with our push to V.1 is we have radically simplified the SDK. Yes, that means some of the functionality that folks were using has gone away, but there's what I believe simpler and better ways of doing it. And what that means for me as a PM is I can write documentation that is easier to understand for people that have never even used .NET before, right? So that's kind of my hope moving forward is not only should the community come closer to you, Ludovic, the SDK itself, I believe, will come closer to you so that it's easier for you to get ramped up and started and building really cool applications on top of Semantic Kernel. When do we think there will be a LTS? Mark, our V1 is going to be LTS, right? Is that the plan?
Yes, that's correct. Like, that's why there's kind of so much churn going on. I know it's very painful at the moment, but what we need to do is we need to make sure our API surface is something that we can, we can do a long-term support for. Like, so we've been working with lots of people on the Azure SDK team. They've given us a lot of really good feedback and advice based on their experiences, and so we've taken all of that. Yeah, it's painful at the moment, but we think it'll be a lot better and a lot more capable as well.
And just to peel behind the curtains a bit, so earlier this week, was it a 2-hour meeting or a 3-hour meeting, Mark? Do you remember?
2 hours, yeah.
It was 2 hours.
Two hours, and then a follow-up meeting of about an hour and a half, right? Yeah.
So in this meeting, there was like, I don't know, there was like 8 or 9 principal engineers across Azure SDK. There was like a distinguished engineer. I've never even been in a meeting with a distinguished engineer at Microsoft. And then we also had the partner person that's been helping us. I was like trying to calculate in my head, like, how expensive is this meeting? But I'm like, it's all worth it because these extremely intelligent, smart people are trying to help us make sure that Semantic Kernel, when we go V1, is actually an SDK that plays nicely with the .NET environment and is idiomatic and is something that all of you will actually enjoy using building AI applications. So we are doing our best on, like, internally on our side to make sure that we deliver something that really does stand the test of time. Cool. And then, yes, if you do the hackathon and you find any issues, please let us know. I'm not the most active person on Discord. I'm going to cop on that, but I've been very active the last few days, so we will see it there. And you can also file issues with us on our GitHub repo. Alex, can you share the link to that hackathon again? And then there's a question on the V1 proposals. So the current plan is I am working on rebuilding all those samples on top of the actual RC1. That should be available on Monday of next week. Once that's completed, we will deprecate all of the .NET code in that library and point people to the actual SDK. Okay. And then Eddie asked, what is the preference if not Discord, GitHub discussion? So I guess what I would say is if it's an issue that needs to be fixed, like you're broken, GitHub issues is the best place. We try to triage issues once a day. There was a gap because of Thanksgiving and some holidays, but we're back to triaging once a day. For like getting help and support, I think Discord is probably still the best place because you can also get some support from the community. And my expectation is now that the team really has been like pulling all-nighters to get RC 2, 3, whatever we're at, V1 done. We are hoping to resume normal human hours in the new year. And at that point, we'll have some more capacity to start helping people out on Discord. Alex, can you share the link to the Discord server for Cody? John is asking, is there a Docker image for kernel memory? I don't know, and I don't know if there's any plans for that yet. Is Devis online? He's
Yeah,
muted.
I'll follow up with Devis then.
Follow with
Get an
Devis.
answer.
Hello, yeah, I'm here. There is a plan, but there is no timeline yet. I think it would be nice to know how you would like to use that Docker image to understand if it is more of a development tool or a production tool, because it makes a lot of difference in terms of testing quality, configurability. So maybe I would suggest raise a GitHub issue with the details about your scenarios. Like I would like to have a Docker image, use it in this way, and that will really help us deciding how to move forward. But yeah, it is a plan to have it at least for testing it so that you can quickly spin it up. But if you need something more, it would be nice to know.
Okay, and then Chris asks, are there other projects besides AutoGen and TaskWeaver that are interesting you can share? There's this Teams AI SDK, which is helpful if you're trying to build bots for Teams. We're actually going to be partnering with them in a bit. Mark shared type chat guidance. They went away and then they came back. So if you go to the guidance repo, you'll notice that they're back from the dead, and they've been doing some cool stuff. I'm trying to think if those are all like the internal Microsoft ones that I'm aware of. There's obviously a ton. If you go on Twitter, there's always some new project that's getting thousands and thousands of stars. It's frankly hard to stay up to date on everything. Okay. Anything from the Semantic Kernel team? Projects that they're watching?
Yeah, just watching. Really good.
Okay, cool. Alex, was there anything else on the agenda?
This is it.
This is it. Okay. We are nearing the end, y'all. So we have one other massive change, I think, coming to our dependency injection. Actually, I haven't looked at how breaking it is. Coming with RC3 this evening. And then my expectation is things should start stabilizing fairly quickly. As part of the blog post, we do have a link to our current burn down table for V1. So if you're interested in seeing kind of like what's top of mind for us, documentation is top of mind for us right now, along with some of the other bug fixes that we're doing. This you can visit. I'm not going to lie to y'all, we are not going to get all of this done for V1, but our goal is to at least get all of the things that would require breaking changes, which I think goes all the way down to line 46. So our goal is to get the breaking changes in, and we are tracking some other pain points that folks are having with the V1. But if it doesn't require a breaking change, we'll likely pick it up in the new year. And yes, I'll paste the link to that. Alrighty. I would suggest documentation clarify the environment. Oh yeah, that's a good idea. And can we create a group for newbies too? Yeah, maybe Alex. Maybe there's a channel we can add to the Discord for newbie simple questions. The one reason I'm entertaining this is I don't think we could build a agent that could answer a lot of the questions that folks are asking right now in the Discord. But if we had a newbie chat for newbie questions, maybe we could try automating something like that. Yes, and so that folks can confuse people too. All righty. Well, if there's no more questions, I just want to again thank the community. I clearly am out of touch with how developers work. I was assuming that we'd release RC1 and it'd take like a few days for people to like check it out and see what's going on. First day, before we even had a chance to hit publish on our blog, people are like, look at all these changes. Like, holy crap. So I appreciate all of y'all really leaning in, telling us what's working, what's not. It's really influencing the product, and we want to be responsive. So thank you. Early adopters are always excited. Yes, that's what I'm learning. Alrighty, thanks y'all. I guess we can go ahead and wrap here. Alex, do you have any closing words? Anything for next time?
So I think that I was also just scrolling through the chat. There's actually a question because it was brought up multiple times, but I think not everyone has this knowledge or answer. Is can you explain dependency injection?
Okay, so I recently learned what dependency injection is too, because I'm not normally a .NET developer. I'm just a silly PM. And this is why you hire smart people like Mark and Roger and Dimitro and Sergey and all the engineers on the team, right? So in my layman's explanation, and an engineer can come off the call and say, Matthew, you got it completely wrong, is in .NET, you end up building these gigantic enterprise applications. And as these things grow, you have all of these different kind of like microservices or files and stuff floating around. And for you to actually keep track of all and make sure that those services are used by the correct other services, this thing called dependency injection was created, which automates grabbing a service and injecting it, that's why it's called injection, into another service. So you can basically create these dependency graphs inside of .NET. And so the reason why this is important, the reason why .NET developers weren't the happiest with the original version of Semantic Kernel is we didn't honor a lot of those patterns. And so if you did have a bunch of services laying around in .NET that you wanted to reuse inside of Semantic Kernel, you had to do a bunch of unnatural things to get them inside of it, right? You couldn't just use the standard dependency injection and then vice versa. So that's kind of what it is. And I guess anyone on the call, did I get that more or less right? I'm getting a thumbs up from Mark.
Yeah, you got it right, Matthew. Yeah.
Alessandra's like, you had us scared for a little bit, but you landed the plane. Okay. All righty. Well, in that case, let's go ahead and wrap there. Thanks, everyone, and keep the feedback coming.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Take care.